Welcome back to Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Day Darling, and shall we see what's going on our lovely island of Fawnhollow today, where, if you could probably tell by the title, we're going to be talking about Steven's Sausage Roll today, but it's not going to be anything related Animal Crossing wise to it. If you're new to this channel or something, if you somehow stumbled upon it, this is just basically me. I've recently beaten the game Steven's Sausage Roll, and I'm just going to be talking about it for about 20 minutes. We'll see. So there might be spoilers. I don't know. Steven's Sausage Roll isn't really one to... There's not really much in way of to spoil. It's a puzzle game, I suppose, and it's one which is very, I suppose, centrally focused on this puzzle game. But if you are concerned about like story spoilers or like gameplay spoilers, I suppose I will warn you before I get to later stuff. But anyway, good evening, everyone. Right now in Fawnhallow, it's 9:01 PM on Monday, October 17, 2022. So yeah, I finished Steven's Sausage Roll yesterday, and overall, what do I think of it? It's a weird thing because, yes, overall, do I like it? Yes, I do like it a lot, and it is a fantastic puzzle game, and probably one of the best puzzle games I've played. But it's a sort of thing where it's like, it's also got, like, problems with it, I'd say. Not problems necessarily, but things I would like to have seen, perhaps, is a better way to put it. To improve it or something. And you might be like, what do you mean by that? Well, it's, I guess the best way I would sum up Steven's Sausage Roll on whether you should play it or not is, do you like puzzle games? If you like puzzle games, you should play Steven's Sausage Roll, because it is a fantastic puzzle game for puzzle gamers. If you don't like puzzle games, I would not recommend you play Steven's Sausage Roll. I would recommend you play a whole bevy of probably other puzzle games out there, which are significantly more accessible than Steven's Sausage Roll, because Steven's Sausage Roll is dense, and it is completely and utterly, I would say, focused on its mechanics of puzzle solving. Like, if you like exploration stuff better, maybe you would try for Witness, but Witness is also kind of difficult, I suppose. Like, Snakebird Primer is also a fantastic sort of like intro, I think, to like a puzzle game sort of thing, using interesting mechanics, and it's not too complicated. Snakebird, if you want to like push it even further. Baba Is You, of course, my favourite puzzle game of all time. I think it has both a fantastic charm with both its style and its art, as well as being a very challenging game where, you know, you can sort of, it's not like you pick your difficulty as per se, but it's like you don't have to complete all the levels, I suppose, to make any progress. You can pick and choose which levels you go through, and you just have to solve enough of them, and then you can choose where you finish Baba Is You. Up to you if you want 100%, or up to you if you're totally fine with just getting the first ending or whatever. But yeah, Steven's Sausage Roll is, that's best way I could describe it, is a very intense, it's definitely the most difficult puzzle game I've played. I think it's a very intense, difficult puzzle game, and it's fantastic if you love puzzle games. So I did love it a lot, but it's just like, it does have some not problems, but let's say, but issues. So what do I like about it? Let's start off by praising it. Firstly, I love the way it's such a simple concept, basically pushed to the absolute extreme. Because there's a lot of times, you know, you get like a load of mechanics in games, and then sometimes you'll find that you play a game and you're like, oh, I wish this mechanic was just expanded on a little bit more. I feel like there's a lot of potential here. Steven's Sausage Roll is basically taking that to the extreme. You've got one mechanic, quote, quote, and that's two mechanics, I say. One is you are really weirdly shaped and have incredibly, like, insane movement is probably how I would describe it. Just completely impractical for it in every sense of a word, but, you know, that's all you got. And then two, you roll sausages, you need to cook them to solve a level. That's basically all there really is to it. I mean, you can break it down even further if you really want, but Steven's Sausage Roll is a very minimalist game, and it just takes those mechanics to the absolute extreme. You know, you start off with the first world, and it's all about just like pushing the sausages, cooking them normally, and like it throws you like directly into it. There's like no tutorial, essentially. Like Baba Is You, you know, it warms you up to tutorial. Snakebird, it introduces you to mechanics slowly. Steven's Sausage Roll is like, bam, first level is an immediate puzzle, and you know, it's, I don't remember how difficult the puzzle is, but it's still like, you know, probably catches you off guard. In fact, the whole first world is actually surprisingly difficult for a puzzle game. Like, it throws you really into the deep end quite quickly. And yeah, that's fantastic. And then I can't remember, there's more mechanics as you go on. So I guess here's your spoiler warning for, as I start going to more bigger spoilers for this game. You start like walking on top of a sausage and rolling them. That's a cool mechanic. That makes sense. And then you basically try and learn the mechanics about that. Then like sausages start stacking on top of each other. That's a pretty cool mechanic. And then you start to learn about the mechanics behind that. You had to do a lot of self-discovery because of course there's no like written instructions or anything. The levels do generally quite a good job, I think, of trying to lead you in the right direction, like the tutorial ones. But it's sometimes hard because I think the biggest problem I have with Steven Sausage Roll is it feels like a lot of not a lot of the levels, but some of the levels are in a weird order. And you might be like, what do you mean by that? It's some levels do a fantastic job of teaching you the central mechanic of that world, because each of the world is basically broken up over different levels. You know, you've got like a walk on sausages roll, the stack up sausages roll, the disconnect yourself from the fork sausage roll, the stab the sausage world, and the island sausage world. And some first levels do a fantastic job of teaching you the basic central mechanic. Like Dead End does a fantastic introduction to the island mechanic, or like the shifting lands mechanics. I don't really know how I would describe it, but I really can't remember other stuff in my head. Like, oh, you know, this is a big one. The tower. No, the Grand Tower. It's something like that. Basically, that level where there's like 8 sausages all stacked on top of each other is a terrible introduction to that mechanic, in my opinion. Because like a lot of these levels are ones which you have to complete to get to the next world, and that's an ongoing thing with Steven Sausage Roll, is you have to beat every level in the game to get to the next world, which I think is what sort of like takes off points from it, not from necessarily a game design perspective, because I think that's a fine game choice if you want it to be hard, but it takes away points from me recommending it to other people, because I'm like, that is intensely frustrating. Like, imagine being like stuck on one, especially if you're not signing up for the puzzle, like the intense puzzle game experience, signing up and then like trying to play a level and being like, oh, I can't solve this level, and then being like, I have no other levels I can go to, I can't just like progress to the next world and see more of it. You are stuck on that level, and then your options are basically like sit here and figure it out for like weeks, or, you know, look up the solution, and both of them are incredibly unsatisfying. Well, I mean, the first one is satisfying once you finally do it, but it's quite intense, shall we say. But that stack sausage world, it only does it a few times with the game. And actually, that's actually an interesting point. There's only like 3 levels in the game I can think of which have like an intense amount of sausages. There's that one, that tower one, where all the 8 sausages stack up, which I think it's a cool level, but it should have been the final level of that world. It shouldn't have been the first level. Like, what a really trial by fire way of like introducing you to the mechanics, I suppose, of that level, of that world. It's insanity, but I suppose once you solve it, you are very well prepared for all the other levels, which feels like a bit of an inverted like difficulty curve, doesn't it? I'm not really sure. That's another point we'll get onto in a sec. The second level it does it on is in the cold region, where you had to disconnect your fork. That one, I think that level was quite cool and was done pretty well, and mainly because even though it was an overwhelming amount of sausages, it was quite sort of directed with what you had to do. It was more like 5 mini levels all wrapped up into one. Like the levels which would not warrant a level on its own, but, you know, can be a stepping stone mechanic in one part of a level. So I think that's done pretty well. And the final one is the final level. So I suppose spoilers for the final level if you really care about that, but honestly, the final level is not very good on reflection. And you might be like, what do you mean by that? Well, it's a thing with Steven Sausage Roll, and not Steven Sausage Roll, puzzle games in general, is that the fun part is trying to figure out the puzzle. And the okay part is executing the puzzle, and the boring part is when executing a puzzle is monotonous. And you might be like, what do you mean by that? Because it's not something you actually run into very often with Steven Sausage Roll, because a lot of the Steven Sausage Rolls are quite small in scope. There's only like a handful of sausages, like at max 4 on most levels. So once you figure out the premise for the level, executing it is, you know, not a breeze, but it's pretty easily done. And a lot of the time you'll be on a sort of cycle of like understand premise, work out, execute, understand next premise, execute, understand next premise, execute. So it never gets quite boring. And it's there's very few levels where it's basically like you understand the premise, you have to execute it, then execute it again. There are some levels where you basically have to do things symmetrically, especially in the final world, but by that point, like the amount of build up, I suppose, to actually do to work it out in the first place was intense enough that I think it's sort of fine. It sort of carries over. But that final level is strangely weird because it's not a crazily difficult level, is what I'd say. Like, it's very instinctive of what you have to do. You have to build a giant tower to reach the top, and you're like, I guess it's kind of cinematic. The problem is, it's once you had to basically pile 8 of these things on top of each other. And the problem is, once you figure out how to pile one of them on top of another one, you're done. You've solved the level, but now you have to do it like 6 more times, and it's really annoying because if mild spoilers, I suppose, for my playthrough. If you do it, I mean, you find out you made a mistake right near the beginning, you have to undo a huge amount of progress and do it all over again. And that's incredibly boring. And I suppose it's not even a particularly, like, I guess it's kind of satisfying, but it's not even like an amazingly clever level. It's not like, there's tons of levels, I think, in Steven Sausage Roll where I was like, wow, that is insanely cool or insanely clever. I'm trying to think of some on the top of my head. Like Backbone comes to mind as being one word. That one's actually, maybe that's not a good example, because certainly at the time I was a bit more iffy on, but, you know, looking back in retrospect, I'm like, that's a pretty cool level. Oh, I can't remember what it's called, like Crater or something. I was like, that's a really cool level as well. The one where you shift like the lands in the final world, that was a really cool level. But it was like you could probably listen to me as I do. Oh, Clover, like, that's a really early level, and I was like, that's such a fantastic level. It's just kind of weird that the final level is, instead of being like some really grand giant level where it's like, oh, you know, just like finally I'm mastering basically all the mechanics at once, or not all of them at once, but like executing upon them and then doing it, and then, you know, finally proving my worth in my ultimate challenge. It's sort of just like, oh, okay, you know, I figured out how to do it. Oh, now I had to do it 6 more times. Because I think about it, like Snakebird's final level was crazy difficult, and it was huge and it was intense, and you look at it and you stare at it and you'd be like, this is impossible, but then it is possible by like squeezing out every single last bit of efficiency mechanics that you can. Baba Z obviously has quite a big one as well for its final level, and things like that. It's just like, it's strange that Steven Sausage Roll is so anticlimactic in the end. And then it's even like sort of, it does have a very nice moment at the end where the final thing you had to do, spoilers again I suppose, for Steven Sausage Roll is you have sort of backtrack throughout the entire game and then cook the final sausages, which you use to actually get to navigate around the world in the first place. And then once you've done that, I get, it's nice. It's nice. And it's very straightforward and, you know, trivial, but, you know, Steven Sausage Roll, it's a thing where it's so minimalistic. It was actually kind of weird navigating backwards because there's no like super clear markings. It wasn't like I walked through the area and be like, oh yeah, this is this world, this is like dark green marsh world or something, or like I walk through this area and be like, oh yeah, this is ice world. But it's like, it's not like it's set as its environment design is like breathtaking or anything. So I sort of just like look back at the levels being like, oh yeah, I guess I kind of remember that one being like kind of difficult and things like that. It's nice it's both nice in concept, but like it's a bit strange. And it brings me to another criticism of Steven Sausage Roll, is obviously it's hyper focused on the mechanics. The only thing you should be paying attention to is the mechanics in this game and this puzzles, and that's intensely all you focus on. So that's why its graphics are super like reduced down or whatever. Like they're very sort of like early, like internet, early like 2000s sort of like graphics. You know, you might see it on like what are those Angel Fire like websites or something. You know, that's at least a feel it got from me, which is part of a joke. You know, don't get me wrong, it's part of a joke, and I'm very aware of that. Its title is fine, I guess. It's nothing like crazy or anything. I guess it's kind of self-descriptive and sort of leans into the sort of reductiveness humor, I suppose, of the entire thing. But also, the music is very reductive as well. It's very sort of minimalist, shall we say, which is, you know, again leaning into the whole thematic. And I do got to give credit for them leaning into thematic. I think it's quite funny, but, you know, it's also a sort of thing where I mean, like, I probably would have appreciated it. Like, it's a sort of thing where it leaning into the thematic is funny, but it does take away from. It's not. It takes away from the game. It doesn't take away from gameplay. If anything, I guess it kind of adds to the gameplay by making you hyper focus on it. But I feel like having, you know, better graphics, having better music probably would have added to the experience, I'm going to be honest. But maybe, you know, you could also argue then it would just sort of get washed away in the plethora of like indie games which exist out there, and, you know, it wouldn't have its own niche. Fair enough. I think that's definitely a lot more subjective, but certainly at least in music, I feel like a lot of times it felt quite empty. The sound design, I guess, is kind of cool. But yeah, and then we go back onto appraising of the game mechanics. Wow, the mechanics are cool. It's amazing how far they pushed it. You know, you got the simple mechanic of or starting mechanic of you move like an absolute lunatic. Like you have the strangest control scheme in existence, where you can only move forward or backwards, and when you press left and right to turn, but you're really large and unwieldy because while your character is only 1 square wide, you also carry a fork which you swing wildly around in front of you, and it makes it really awkward to turn around corners. That is a very interesting mechanic which they absolutely milked all they could out of it, and it worked. It just worked, is what I'd say. Every mechanic that they introduced felt like it was a natural progression to me, right? It built off previous mechanics, that it felt like a natural fit. It was some of them I even predicted, I think. And yeah, like, it's amazing how many levels I got out of it in the first place, because there's so many times I was playing during Steven Sausage Roll, I was like, am I just missing like a well, no, okay, sorry, let me rephrase this. I was playing during Steven Sausage Roll, I would say something like, am I just clearly I'm just misunderstanding something about this mechanic, because it's a sort of awareness I have, being like, I know this game has very few mechanics, but still this level is so difficult that I feel like I must have missed something. And if anything, I guess that's kind of a sign of a well-crafted puzzle, where it's sort of like you look at it and think it's impossible, and then you somehow solve it and you're like, wow. that was great. And that's something that Steven Sausage Roll does fantastically well. I cannot fault it in its mechanics. It's, well, okay, I can fault it a little bit, and that's, I think it is a little bit unintuitive when things start stacking on top of each other, how things work, because like there's like a priority of like friction, as I ended up calling it, I think, in my let's play. I don't really remember, where like sausages on land, sausages stick to land better than they stick to your head, better than they stick to a fork, or something like this. Like, I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's something like that, and I think that's a bit unintuitive, I would say. I'm not really sure what you do to like fix that, but oh well. It's solvable. It's like, it's dealable, I suppose. Part of it is working out in the first place. I'm trying to think what else I was going to say about Steven Sausage Roll. Anyway, it's just like a super interesting puzzle game, which, if anything, it kind of feels, I almost want to say it's subversive, but it's not actually subversive. Like, at the end of the day, it is just like a puzzle game, but it just like, part of it feels like it kind of is subversive, where like it played with my expectations, where it's sort of like, you know, they want to bait you into doing something, but the obvious thing, and then being like, yeah, of course that wasn't going to work. Of what were you even thinking? I mean, it sort of plays with your mind, being like, of course you know this is not going to work, but you really can't see any other way forward. And especially as someone who's, you know, played a lot of puzzle games, you'll be like, how can I not see like any other path forward except this one? This level feels like it's impossible, but I know intuitively it must not be. Oh, that's also another thing which Steven Sausage Roll does exceedingly well, is how refined all the levels are, because not every single level, okay, but I'd say like 95% of the levels, they give you exactly what you need, like literally no more and no less than what you need to solve it. Well, obviously no less. Like, if they gave you less than what you needed to solve a puzzle, it wouldn't be a very good puzzle game, but no more than what you exactly need to solve a puzzle, and things are set up so precisely to exactly counter to actually create the puzzle in the first place. Like, there's so many times I'll be playing, I'll be like, why is this part like randomly jutting up? And I'll be like, oh, this is exactly what I need for one step of a puzzle. Or I'll be like, oh, this part's jutting up because it blocks off this solution, which would make this level too easy. And then it just makes you wonder again, being like, wow, I can't believe it's still possible with this like inhibitor in the way, shall we say. So yeah, I think Steven Sausage Roll really did sort of wow me with its puzzle design and all that good stuff. Like, it just like, it's amazing how well crafted it feels like it is. But yeah, what else could I possibly say about Steven Sausage Roll? So I would say, if you like puzzle games, absolutely check it out. You will probably love it. If you don't like puzzle games, I'm gonna be honest, you should probably not. Pumpkin, sure. I think you called me pumpkin. Someone's called me pumpkin before, I don't know. I feel like it's not, I think you might get frustrated unless you have an immense amount of like tenacity and perseverance, because it really is quite difficult. Like, I can't stress enough, the game is difficult. And that's, like, you know, certainly coming from me as well, who, like, I'm not going to say I find puzzle games necessarily easier than the average, well, maybe I do find puzzle games easier than the average person, but I tend, excuse me, that's my hubris coming back to try and finish me, but, yeah, I think of myself as pretty decent at puzzle games, I will say. I have a decent amount of experience with them, I like puzzles, and, you know, I have a mindset which I think works really well with them. But even I found it very challenging, this game. Like, it's crazy. Like, I'm trying to think of the hardest levels I can think of in Snakebird or something, you know. Steven Sausage Roll, it feels like it goes past that. But it's also like, yeah, it's a bit weird with its how the levels are arranged, I think, is mainly the biggest problem, because I really felt like towards the end I was basically getting like really good at the puzzles, which you might be like, that's fine, but it was a bit strange, you know, because I was like in the final world and I felt like I was breezing through it far easier than I was going through the previous 2 worlds. That might be like subjective onto the person. Maybe I just jive with that mechanic so much better than I jive with the others. I don't really know, but it felt like it made the pacing a bit weird. But, you know, puzzle games pacings are very difficult to get right in the first place, because who knows how good the person who's playing it is. So yeah, Steven's Sausage Roll, I would say it's got flaws, but it's still absolutely worth buying and playing, especially if you love puzzle games. If you're interested in puzzle games, but probably give it a skip if you're not interested in puzzle games, or, you know, or try a different puzzle game first, at least to get your feet wet, because this one is hard. But yeah, for my own personal experiences, I enjoyed Steven's Sausage Roll. I think it was super fun and it was definitely worth playing. And yeah, I'm still going to be thinking about it, I suppose, like those cool levels and mechanics, probably in the future when I play different puzzle games as well. And that's a good praise, I think. So anyway, if you have been watching, thank you very much. It's been Animal Crossing New Horizons. I've been Dear Darling. Any likes, comments, subscription, shares are greatly appreciated. Join my Dear Darling Discord, follow me on Twitter down below. Hope we see each other again, but for now, it's our farewell. So until next time. Oh, I didn't even talk about the lore. I guess the lore was kind of amusing. Not amusing, but like, it's a part of it, I suppose. It's not like particularly deep or anything, but bye bye for now.